Welcome to CMOs Without Borders.
I'm Joel Crampton. I help financial advisors, RIAs, and wealth managers replace scattered marketing with strategic systems that boost AUM and production volume.
I'm Mandy McPhee. I am a fractional chief marketing officer and work with founders who are doing too much and need someone to turn their scattered marketing into a system that actually drives results.
Welcome to CMOs Without Border. Our guest today is Ethan Chazin from Chazin the Dream. This is a little bit different of an episode for us. We're trying something different. So we're in our second season now, and we're trying to just get more guests on the podcast. And with our busy schedules, we're going to try just doing solo guest appearances. So Ethan, you're our first run at this, and hopefully I'm a good enough host that I can keep the conversation flowing.
I appreciate your willingness to embrace discomfort.
Absolutely. Let me give everybody just a quick introduction about you, Ethan. Ethan, you and I first met through the H7 network. Is that right? Yep. So shout out to Clay Hicks and the organization that he's built. So Ethan spent the last 15, 20 years doing coaching and consulting, focusing on building amazing workplace cultures, trying to get those organizations to win those Best Places to Work awards. He's also an author of a couple books. The most recent is called The Compassionate Organization. Runs a blog, runs a podcast called Chazin the Dream, which I was fortunate enough to be on recently. So happy to return the favor. And my first question right off the bat, though, is what is the dream? You're chasing the dream. You're chasing the dream. What is the dream?
Well, I think for every individual, as you know, that's fundamentally unique.
Yeah.
I think that most individuals are too afraid to go to that honest space where they say in a moment of quiet solitude, if I could remove all of the barriers, right, whether they're financial, familial, all the obligations, and they said, this is the intersection of what I'm most passionate about and what I'm most proficient at and where I can add the most value, the intersection of those is the dream fulfilled. And I think for many of us, we're too afraid to go there, or we create artificial limitations. And so the dream for me was I spent 20 years leading marketing organizations in banking and financial services. And I finally decided my dream was to get out on my own so I could help people unleash their full potential and realize everything that they wanted to dream into practice. So that's my dream.
Great. And of all the hats that you're wearing, is the title that you lead with is a fractional chief culture officer? Is that right? Is that how you would introduce yourself?
I mean, it's a twofold function. Over the last 17 years in my practice, I've been doing two things that I'm most passionate about. One is chief culture officer. I love to create great places to work. And I think tied to that is chief people officer, right? So your culture is how people feel and act every day. So I would say that I'm both a fractional chief people, chief culture officer. I don't care what you call me as long as you call me.
Exactly. And if you have something mean to say, he can take it because he's a New Yorker.
It's how we roll.
Yeah. Were you born and bred? Are you original
No.
New York? No.
I love when people say you're a New Yorker just because I slur words like dog talk, water, shore, drawer. I was born in Oakland, California.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, I moved to New Jersey when I was 4. We moved to New York City when I was 10. I stayed here until I was 18 and went away to college. And then I went out to California, finished up my undergraduate degree, came back to New York City, went down to Washington, D.C., got my MBA, moved to New Jersey, got married, and moved back to New York in 2019. So I guess every time I try to get away, they pull me back in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The city has something about it. What part of the city do you live in?
I'm on the Upper West Side of Manhattan.
Okay. Is that the nice Richie fancy place on the other side of Central Park?
I'm actually on Central Park West, but
Okay.
you have to be careful about New York City. Some pockets have gentrified, and after COVID, things look more like a war zone. But yeah, I'm on the Upper West Side. I'm literally right on Central Park.
Beautiful. Love that. I've spent some time up there. Took the kids on vacation. Fantastic place to visit. Not sure if I could live there. A little too much concrete for me, but I love the culture and the melting pot and everything that the city has. So you started your coaching business 15 or 17 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
What made you decide to go off on your own?
So it was, as you talk about what is the dream, for me, the dream was, I knew at some point in my career, I mean, I spent 20 years in corporate America leading marketing and branding and communication functions, mostly for large Fortune 100 firms. I knew early on in my career that my passion was not in alignment with what I was doing, right? So I spent a majority of that first phase of my career helping organizations monetize, sell products and services. But fundamentally, I was always interested in the question of what would it look like if you built an amazing place to work? What would it look like if your people were engaged, empowered, trusted, working collaboratively? And so I was always the one who raised my hand and volunteered for the missions to build teams and do training and development programs. And day job, I worked in New York City's largest cable and telecom company during the recession, 2007 to 2008. I grew their revenue about 45% the year I was here. My reward was I was one of 10,000 people laid off.
Yep. I've been there before. Yep.
I know we've talked about this, right? And so when you asked me about the dream for me was, you ask yourself when you're going through a career transition or you're saying, what's my next act? I asked myself, what was I most passionate about? When I was fully engaged, the being motivated, intrinsically motivated, what did it look like? And it always came back to I was helping organizations unleash their people's untapped potential. And so I started my practice actually doing executive coaching and helping individuals do their own career transitions. And about 6 or 7 years into it, Joel, I transitioned to organizational development work. And that's what I love. I work with small to mid-sized businesses, organizations. I help them maximize their people's performance and productivity. And in doing so, create a great place to work that ultimately, when they do an exit or a sale or they go through a merger, they maximize their value, the valuation, because it's built on an amazing culture.
Yeah, I think that's exactly why I wanted you to be on the podcast is because we, Mandy and I both work with small to medium-sized businesses across the financial services sector. And it's a people business, it's a trust business. And if the employees that are working at your firm don't embody that kind of mentality, they're going to deliver a subpar service to their clients. And so building that foundational, I think, is so key, especially as businesses start to scale up and bring on more people from the outside. A lot of times when firms are starting, it's the founder, a couple partners maybe. They're very tight knit. They're typically friends, or it's family members working. And so when they start bringing in people from outside of that trust circle and trying to build up their organization and help scale, I think, and you'll have to talk about kind of your process, but they have to ensure that they're still delivering that same level of service, that same level of personal touch and attention. The end product is certainly, from a financial services or financial advisor standpoint, is dollars, return, hard numbers, but it's the people, it's the trust, it's the soft skills, it's relationships that are built over many, many years, many, many decades that keep people coming back and referring and becoming raving advocates of those organizations. So Ethan, can you tell me a little bit about your process when you go into working with a firm and how you structure your approach to building up those wonderful cultures?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I love so much of what you just said, Joel, is culture is foundationally built upon relationship cultivation. And it's funny because that's asked backwards of the way that most people do this, right? They look at the financials. And the financials are the least instructive method to employ to look at culture, because financials are a lagging indicator. So what we know now, and I'm going to back into my methodology, but what we know now is when I started my career in the early 90s, right, I was in advertising. And so what we used to say back then is just as relevant today when we talk about people, right? So we'd say, I know that half of my advertising budget is wasted. I just don't know which half. Because we didn't know the ROI of marketing efficacy. And now we can measure everything marketing. But now you fast forward to 2026 and AI and the intersection of human capital and artificial intelligence. It's, no, my largest expense, payroll, I know half of it's wasted. I just don't know which half. And so my methodology is I start out with this a simple premise. Your people are not an expense to be managed. If your firm, whether they're 5 bros in Silicon Valley or 50,000 employees, your people are not an expense to be managed. If that's your mindset, we can't work together. When you look at how an organization is going to achieve financial security, but also financial success, you've got 3 levers you can pull. One is strategy, and that doesn't help you, right? Because if you have a great strategy and the people, you don't have the right people to implement, that's effectively meaningless. Now we look at operational efficiency, we look at kind of technology, we look at dashboards and EOS and AI and et cetera, et cetera. If you've got the right tools, but you don't have the right people to use those tools, you're not going to be financially successful. People are an investment. So my methodology is predicated on, I'm certified in a number of coaching frameworks where I'll go into an organization and I do a 365 assessment. I call it a pulse survey of how they're interacting with their stakeholders. I start with employees. I never talk with leadership first because they're often the least clued in to what's going on.
Yeah, they're so far removed most of the time.
Exactly. Even in flatter organizations, they're still not in the weeds, so to speak, of the day in, day out work typically. And I know that that's a generalization. I go to employees first. I conduct conversations. I go to a list of your clients, your most profitable clients, your least profitable clients, those that have left you, and I talk very deep-seated kind of level why. Then I go to partners, vendors, suppliers, contractors, and I have conversations there. Then, if you're publicly traded, if you're large enough, I talk to your board, and that's where they're really clueless. And then I kind of taper back down into the leadership team, the management team, the founders, and we talk there. I then do an assessment of your HR efficacy. So I look at your talent acquisition, talent retention, talent development. I've got a proprietary process. I interview your clients in terms of your strategies for client retention, client renewals, customer lifetime value. I look at your brand equity vis-a-vis your Q score. What are people saying about you? And then I look at how often your people are promoted, how long your quality of hires, your employees are staying with you. Are your employees referring great people? You said VIP brand ambassadors. Are those your employees? Because your employees are your most profitable tribe. And I literally come back after I'm done. I do that 365 view and I say in the next 30, 60, 90 days, I strongly urge you to do this, this, and this. Beyond 90 days is not helpful because nobody's thinking beyond 90 days right now. And literally, that's my process. I know it sounds kind of convoluted, but in practice, it's pretty straightforward. I measure what people are saying about your organization, and I put a value to it. I literally, at the end of that, say, your current culture is worth this, and your people investment strategy is giving you this employee ROI. And after that, what I'd like to do is stay with you and implement that, but that's what I'm handing you when I say next 30, 60, 90 days.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, it mirrors so much what I think Manny and I do from a foundational marketing perspective is we get in, do the digging and the due diligence, the detective work, and figure out a level set. You know, what does the organization look like? How is it appearing? We also do client surveys as well, just to get a pulse, like you were saying. We do a little bit of a skills matrix where we figure out where people are strong in, where they're not strong in. Maybe people are not being utilized to the best of their ability. Maybe they have interests or skill sets that aren't even being tapped. They're brought into organization to do one thing, but they can actually scale and do something else. So I love the foundational approach that you take, and that's exactly the same way we do our first 30 days as we kind of put together that plan of attack for the next 3 to 6 months, and then hand that to our client and say, do you want to implement it? Do you want me to help you? Do you want to bring in somebody else? So yeah, I love the mirror kind of approach that you and I both take. And
Well, this actually is something that I was kind of meaning to introduce because when you and I spoke, you talked about your methodology and from a marketing perspective, what you do in terms of going in and look at the alignment of what their people, your clients are doing, the success rate in utilizing your workforce's skill set, background, experience. But it's interesting that when I started my consulting practice, one of the first things I did was I built my own human capital audit. And it was predicated on this idea, which is really just as true today as it was back in 2009. 75% conservatively of everything you spend on your employees is wasted. And what that means is if you're still interviewing and recruiting talent based off of job descriptions, that's 20th century. That's a dead model. And it gets to what you were saying, Joel, is that when you're hiring for a core set of roles, responsibilities in a given job, first of all, that can be taught on the job. But what you're not doing is seeking individuals' behaviors, characteristics, work ethic, background, experience, culture, upbringing, all those things that are difficult to measure, so we don't. You're fitting that candidate, that new employee, in kind of a whack-a-mole shape, right, in a silo.
yeah,
But what you're not doing is allowing them to grow with you. And so that's why I created a human capital audit, was to look at how you then manage each individual's career and professional development. By the way, you don't own that. They don't own that. You both own that. And so a lot of what I do in terms of consulting is creating a bridge between the employee-employer relationship that's based on things that are different now in the 21st century. Because as you know, millennials and Gen Zs are the two largest segments of the American workforce. And they fundamentally have different values, belief, and ideology, which goes into your marketing.
absolutely. Yeah, I think good marketing attracts good people.
But
Whether
people
it's
don't know what it
clients or
is.
employees,
Let's be honest. Let's be honest and call a spade a spade. One of the fundamental shortfalls of business owners, founders, anybody really is, and you can maybe talk on this, people don't have an understanding of what marketing actually is. I mean, I teach marketing and I've taught it in 10 colleges and universities, undergraduate, graduate. I spent 30 years doing it. People don't understand what marketing is, and so they don't understand what culture is because they don't understand how to live your values and how you can leverage that to recruit top talent, get the best customers. It doesn't exist. And that's a fundamental challenge I found in my consulting when I talk about marketing and branding and communications.
Yep, finding those values, the messaging, like what are you providing to clients? What's that level of service? Like what's the soft things? I mean, you're going to deliver on performance and investment returns and that kind of thing. But what's the soft, like why should people work with you versus the same person down the road that can deliver very similar service to you? Like what differentiates you? And I think a lot of firms will say it's our people, but I don't think they all, like they could say it, but I don't know if they actually embody it.
Yeah, I mean, you really want to put lipstick on a pig and go there?
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, as you said, my podcast, I bring thought leaders from Irrational Capital, Ethisphere, Great Place to Work, and we talk about culture, right? And like I said, there's 30, 40 years of organizational behavior research that shows how organizations who build great places to work, they financially outperform those who don't. We've got ETFs, we've got publicly traded funds. They're called Happy, where we know the best places to work, those funds financially outperform the S&P 500 and the Russell 2000. I get so sick and tired of people saying, oh, culture is nice and warm and fuzzy. No, it's demonstrably a metric of how you financially outperform your competitors.
Yep, absolutely. And you touched on something about the EOS model, so the entrepreneurial operating system. I think one of their biggest mantras is the right people in the right seats. And I think that's what you hit on a lot with, just trying to find those right people to join the organization. Even if you have some, like the right person in the wrong seat, they're not going to be happy, they're not going to perform well. So it's really finding the right people and then maybe creating seats for them.
Right. That's really fundamentally interesting because that's one of the core tenets of my methodology is you hire for attributes or characteristics and you figure out how those great people can do whatever they need to do. You don't label it, you don't create the job description, you look for attributes, which by the way means you need to change your interviewing and recruiting to go from traditional interviews to behavioral interviewing, where you don't say, what would you do in this role? You say, tell me about a time from the past where you found yourself in a similar situation. What did you do? Did you fail? Great. What did you learn from that? What worked? So it's not what would you do, it's what have you done. And the other thing I'd say is, especially banking and financial services, man, they're going about it ass backwards. They're recruiting from the same well. They're going to the same universities, the same top schools. They're looking for the same economics, finance majors. They're looking, and they're literally creating carbon copies of mini-me's at a time where we need to move to a more culturally diverse workforce. So they need to fundamentally change their model, and that's predicated on marketing your culture. What are your values? What's your vision? What's your mission? And you can't just say it, you got to live it. And that's what I'm usually asked to do, is to come in and figure out how to make people live that.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of tools that help assess people coming in. I mean, there's the disc profiles, Enneagram, predictive indexes, culture indexes. Do you use any sort of those types of tools, or maybe we can even shift the conversation into AI and new tools to try to take in large language models and bring in some of the sophistication of these big data sets to then hone it down and to make your hires even better?
Yeah, I think that's I think, if not a critically important question, Joel, I think that's the question. The piece especially about the AI and the leveraging of technology. I would say, first of all, and thank you for asking, I am extended disc certified. So part of my initial assessment is, and I haven't mentioned this when you asked it, is how do people work together? Because as we go from command control pyramid to flatter matrix organizations where we delete layers of management partially in response to the anticipation of AI flattening workforce. So a lot of my work is relationship based. How do you feel most comfortable in your communication and how others communicate with you? And teaching mostly leadership teams, because that's when I'm typically brought in. How do you communicate with others by meeting them where they are in terms of their comfort zone? I'm also certified in a number of work productivity frameworks like 6 Boxes and Discovery Dimensions. I'm a Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses Growth Coach. I'm also a certified Kaufman Foundation out of Kansas City coach.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think AI is going to be really fascinating, and I see it now. And on my YouTube channel, I've done a number of videos on companies who are already in that mindset of, I need to conduct layoffs in advance of AI taking over work. And I think that is, like everything else, a cop-out. I think it's lazy. And I think it's, unfortunately, we're going to see more and more of it at places like UPS and American Express and Amazon, where they're already laying off tens of thousands of workers just in January. But as far as AI is not a job. AI is a powerful tool to get work done. So it's not job-based, it's task-driven. So as we talk about AI and models of tools like that to kind of rethink our workforce, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. I think we need to, because what that does is dehumanize our workforce. I think AI is a powerful tool, but we need to focus first on what you were saying before. How do I create a workforce that's ready for the 21st century? How does it have my people have the behaviors and attributes that I could then go out into the marketplace and promote? A hedge fund, private equity fund is different than Ben and Jerry's. So AI doesn't tell me how to build a workplace that reflects my culture.
Right.
But it is a tool. So the first thing I would say is, before you use the EOS or the tools or the technology, do what you said. What's your vision? We can't prove a vision's correct, right? A vision is aspirational. It's what we want to, what our legacy is. It has to move the hearts and minds of our employees and our clients and others. So start with your vision statement. What do you want to become? What do you want to be known for? your mission statement is tactical. It's what you do and who you do it for. Nail that down. Then what are your core values? Because one of the things in my audit that I'll do is I'll see how you incorporate reinforcement of values into your people's workflow. So vision, mission, core values, nail that down and think about the kinds of people who fit in that. And then you can go through AI. All the executive search firms and recruiters are struggling with how do they use AI and HR people to change the model on recruitment. I think that's putting the technology ahead of the people, and I'm not an advocate for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know AI grabs a lot of the headlines nowadays, but is there one common theme, and even before AI gets into the conversation, is just one common theme that executive teams struggle with on how to build their culture within their companies? And they say, Ethan, we're struggling. We're not sure what's going wrong. We're starting to see, like you mentioned, financials as a lagging indicator. So that maybe they're starting to see a downturn in financials. And so is there just a common theme that just continues to pop up day after day, organization after organization, that you can immediately, in your years of expertise, easily hone in on and say, Mr. or Mrs. Business Owners, this is exactly the issue that I feel like your firm is facing? I mean, you have your instincts, again, something AI can't replicate, but you, over your career, have developed these instincts. You just kind of get that spidey sense that something is off.
Absolutely. And I love that kind of evocative imagery of, the tingling on the hairs in the back of your neck. That's predicated on nearly 40 years of experience, where the things that I see is, trend lines that come up over and over and over again are, you have now a 5-generation workforce. And if you factor in the alphas who this past summer, the 16-year-olds started coming into organizations and doing summer work, you have 6 generations.
Wow.
It's the inability to blend a collaborative team that takes into consideration the diversity from a generational standpoint. So that's the first thing I see is people are not working effectively together because of generational divide. And so that's what I'm often asked to figure out, is reconcile how to get people to embrace the difference and, with respect and civility, encourage the diversity of idea, background, experience. And that's when people think diversity, they think, oh, it's a quota thing. No. So that's the first thing that comes through. And because of that, there's a related challenge. My spidey sense comes out when I'm talking to a business owner or a leadership team, and they talk about the fact that one of two things: either they speak on behalf of their employees and they speak incorrectly. They say, we don't have an issue, or our employees are happy. And when I do a little bit of deep digging, it takes me 2 seconds to find out there's a disconnect.
Yep.
The leadership team does not have an accurate picture of what's going on, but they tell themselves lies. And so that's one problem. The second is there's a lack of maturity on founders and entrepreneurs and leaders, even if they have the best of intentions.
Yep.
Here's the deal with culture. You were talking about, buddies getting together and forming a business, or people partnering. The minute you find that second person to be part of your, the minute you go from individual to two and people, you've now got culture. Culture is the interaction and the interdependency of relationships. So to say we don't have a culture problem is one. The second is we don't really have a culture. That's false. You do, believe it or not. You're just not actively engaged in architecting, designing, shaping it. So it's happening organically. And then you may not touch it till you have 10 or 15 or 50 employees. And you wake up and you say, my people aren't working effectively together. There's
That's
conflict.
what happened, yeah.
Yeah, what happened? Or the other thing, honestly, Joel, you asked me, this is an amazing question. Sometimes the issue is one problem employee who happens to be in a position of power or authority. And they're toxic. And as you know, it only takes one toxic individual to literally kind of scorch the earth of that culture. And that, unfortunately, they're people in a position of power. And the rest of the leadership team kind of turns a blind eye because maybe they're a rainmaker.
Yeah. Well, I think that's when they need to bring in an outside resource, such as yourself or me in a fractional marketing. We have a biased opinion. We're objective. We tell it as it is, as we see it. So, Ethan, I appreciate your time. I know we just barely scratched the surface. So if people wanted to dig in, learn more about how they can create an amazing culture within the organization, what's the best way for them to reach you?
It's one of two ways. The first is just email me,
Okay.
Ethan@thechazingroup.com, or just literally text me, call me. The number's 917-239-1. You can go to my website, thechazingroup.com. But I really appreciate this opportunity, Joel. I love what you're doing here with the podcast. It's critically important.
Okay. Thank you so much for being on. I'll put all this information in the show notes, including links to his podcast, his book, everything else he's got going on. But Ethan, appreciate your time and looking forward to our next conversation.
Absolutely, me too. And until then, everybody, don't forget, go chasing the dream.
Love it. All right. Bye, Ethan. Thank you.
Take care, Joel. Bye-bye.